I never thought I'd be one of those guys writing a post like this. But here I am. Last night, I found out my wife, Jane, had plans to go on a date with another man. A date, not a business meeting, not catching up with an old friend, but an actual date. And the worst part? She didn't even think it was cheating. It all started when I got home early from work. Jane was in the bedroom, getting dressed up like she was going to some fancy dinner. I mean, full effort. Makeup, perfume, that red dress I bought her for our anniversary. I figured she was just going out with her friends, so I casually asked, "Where are you headed?" She barely even looked at me while adjusting her lipstick. "Oh, just out for a bit." Something felt off immediately. Jane always told me when she had plans. So I pressed, "With who?" She hesitated, just for a second. Then, in the most casual voice, she said, "Robert Cohen." I had no idea who the hell Robert Cohen was. "Who?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She sighed, like I was annoying her. "A guy from work. We've been talking, and I just thought, why not?" I felt my stomach drop. "Why not what?" "Go on a date," she said, just like that. A date. My wife was going on a date with another man. And she said it like she was telling me she was picking up groceries. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process what I was hearing. "You're joking, right?" Jane rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's not cheating if I'm being honest about it." I just stared at her. I couldn't believe what was coming out of her mouth. "You're my wife. You don't just date other people." She sighed again, looking frustrated, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Look, our marriage has been so routine. I just want a little excitement. And I thought if I told you up front, it wouldn't be a big deal." Not a big deal. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "So let me get this straight. You think it's okay to go on a date with another man because you told me about it?" She shrugged. "Honesty matters. If I were sneaking around, that would be different. But I'm not hiding anything. So what's the problem?" I had never been so angry in my life. And that's when I did something I still can't believe. I walked up to Jane, grabbed the hem of that red dress, and yanked. The fabric tore with a loud rip, exposing her in just her underwear. Jane let out a shocked gasp, stumbling back, covering herself. And that's when I realized our bedroom window was open. And standing right outside, in the yard, our neighbors. Their eyes went wide. Someone actually dropped a beer bottle. Jane screamed, scrambling to grab a blanket off the bed. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't even care. I looked her dead in the eye. "If you're so comfortable letting another man see you like this, what's the problem?" She was furious. "You are insane." "No," I shot back. "I'm a husband who thought he had a wife. Turns out, I just had a roommate looking for an upgrade." I stormed out of the room, ignoring her yelling behind me. I grabbed my keys and left. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be in that house another second. I didn't know where I was driving. My hands were shaking on the wheel. My mind was racing. Jane, my wife, on a date, with some guy from work. And the worst part? She acted like it was normal. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I ended up at a bar. Not my usual place, just somewhere I could sit in the dark and process this. I ordered a whiskey, neat. I wasn't even a big drinker, but I needed something strong. A few minutes in, my buddy Mark walked in. Total coincidence. He saw me sitting alone, came over, and immediately knew something was off. "What happened?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from me. I let out a bitter laugh. Jane was about to go on a date with another guy. His eyes widened. "The hell are you talking about?" She got all dressed up, full makeup, perfume, everything. Told me she was going out with some guy from work. I took a slow sip of my drink. Said it's not cheating because she was being honest about it. Mark stared at me like I had just told him the world was ending. "You're messing with me. I wish." He let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "Man." I knew she was selfish, but I didn't think she was this bad. That made me pause. "What do you mean?" Mark sighed and leaned in. "Look, I wasn't gonna bring this up, but since we're here, I've seen her getting too close with guys before. At parties. Work events. Nothing obvious, but, little things. Laughing too much. Touching their arms. Acting like she wasn't married." My grip tightened around my glass. "And you didn't tell me?" I didn't think it was serious. Figured she was just one of those women who liked attention but wouldn't actually cross the line. He exhaled. "Guess I was wrong." I leaned back in my seat, my whole body tense. "So what do I do now?" Mark didn't even hesitate. "You leave her." I let out a humorless chuckle. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he said firmly. "Dude, she's already got one foot out the door. You really want to be the guy sitting at home while your wife is out on dates?" I didn't answer. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I finished my drink in one gulp and stood up. "I need some air." Mark nodded. "Just don't do anything stupid." I stepped outside, letting the cold night air hit me. I checked my phone. 10 missed calls from Jane. A bunch of texts, too. "Jane, where are you?" "Jane, we need to talk." "Jane, you humiliated me." "Jane, I can't believe you did that." "Jane, come home. Let's be adults about this." I stared at my screen, my thumb hovering over the block button. Then, right as I was about to shut my phone off, another text popped up. This one wasn't from Jane. It was from an unknown number. "Robert Cohen. Hey man, I think we should talk." I stared at my phone. Robert Cohen. The guy Jane was supposed to go on a date with. Why the hell was he texting me? My first instinct was to ignore it. But after everything that had just happened, I needed answers. So, I texted back. "Me, talk about what?" A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again. "Robert Cohen. I didn't know she was married." "I swear, man." I exhaled sharply. "Oh, this just got better and better." "Me, how'd you get my number?" "Robert Cohen. Jane gave it to me. Said if I wanted to clear things up, I should reach out to you." My blood boiled. She gave him my number? Like this was some kind of misunderstanding we just needed to talk out? Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again. "Robert Cohen. I'm not trying to start anything. She told me she was single. I only found out tonight when one of our co-workers mentioned you." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Jane lied. Not open honesty. Not, "It's not cheating if I tell you." She straight up told another man she was single. I needed to hear this in person. "Me, where are you?" "Robert Cohen. Still at the restaurant where we were supposed to meet." "I can wait if you want to talk." I was already heading to my car before I even replied. 15 minutes later, I walked into the restaurant. It was a nice place, dim lighting, quiet music, the kind of place Jane always wanted me to take her to but never actually suggested. And there he was. Robert Cohen. Mid-30s, tall, clean-cut, business casual. He looked like the type of guy who drove a nice car, wore expensive watches, and never worried about rent. As soon as he saw me, he stood up and held up his hands. "Look, I don't want any trouble." I sat down across from him, my hands clasped together. "Just tell me everything." He nodded. "All right. Jane and I work in the same department. We started talking a couple of months ago, just normal work stuff at first. Then she started texting me. Flirting, I guess." I stayed silent, my fingers tightening into fists under the table. "She told me she was single. Divorced, actually." He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Said her marriage ended because her husband, you, were boring and didn't appreciate her." My stomach twisted. Tonight was supposed to be our first actual date. We'd only talked at work before, grabbed coffee once. She asked me out. She asked you out? My voice came out rough. He nodded. Yeah. And I figured, why not? She's attractive, fun to talk to. He stopped himself. Sorry. Not trying to make this worse. I took a slow breath. So you had no idea she was married? None. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then turned the screen to face me. Messages from Jane. Jane, I feel like I can finally breathe around you. Jane, I wish we met sooner. Jane, my ex never made me feel this way. I forced myself to stay calm. My ex. She was rewriting history, making me out to be some kind of deadweight she had to escape. Robert exhaled. Man, I don't know what's going on with her, but I want no part of this. She played me just like she played you. I nodded slowly. Appreciate you telling me. He hesitated. For what it's worth, you deserve better. I let out a bitter chuckle. Yeah. I'm starting to realize that. I stood up. Have a good night, Robert. As I walked out, my phone buzzed again. Jane, come home. Let's talk. For the first time all night, I felt completely sure of my next move. I wasn't going home. I stood outside the restaurant, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I wasn't going home. Not to Jane. Not to the house where she had been planning her little date night like I didn't exist. My phone buzzed again. Jane, I know you're mad, but can we please talk? I stared at the message. The nerve of this woman. She had just been exposed as a liar, telling another man she was single, trash-talking me to him, setting up a date behind my back, and she still thought we needed to talk. I wasn't in the mood for talking. I was in the mood for action. I got in my car and started driving. Not toward home, but toward our best friend's place, Josh and Lisa. They had known us for years, had been with us through the highs and lows. If anyone deserved to hear what Jane had done, it was them. I needed someone to hear this. Someone who would look me in the eye and tell me I wasn't crazy. When I knocked on Josh and Lisa's door, it was late, almost midnight. Josh opened the door, his brows furrowed. Dude, what's going on? Lisa appeared behind him, holding a mug of tea. You okay? I let out a sharp breath. Jane was about to go on a date with another guy tonight. Their eyes widened at the same time. Lisa was the first to react. Wait. What? Josh blinked. Jane. You're Jane. I nodded. Yeah. She got all dressed up, told me she was going out with Robert Cohen from her job. And when I confronted her, she told me it wasn't cheating because she was honest about it. Lisa's jaw dropped. That, she stopped herself, looking at Josh, then back at me. That's insane. Josh folded his arms. And you're sure? Like, she actually said that. I just came from meeting the guy, I said bitterly. He thought she was single. She told him we were divorced. Josh let out a low whistle. Man, he rubbed his face. That's beyond messed up. Lisa sat down heavily on the couch, shaking her head. I always knew Jane had a selfish streak, but this? This is next level. Josh nodded. What are you gonna do? I exhaled. I don't know yet. But I know one thing. I'm not going home. Lisa looked at me sympathetically. You can crash here tonight. I nodded, my shoulders slumping in relief. Thanks. Josh patted my shoulder. Whatever you need, man. You're not alone in this. And for the first time that night, I actually believed it. The next morning, I woke up to 100 missed calls and texts from Jane. Some were apologetic. Some were defensive. Some were downright angry. Jane, I can't believe you ran off like that. You're being childish. Jane, you humiliated me last night. How do you think that made me feel? Jane, why aren't you answering me? Jane, where are you? Then, the last text. Jane, if you don't come home today, don't bother coming home at all. I stared at the screen. My heart should have been pounding. I should have been panicked at the idea of my marriage coming to an end. Instead, I felt calm. I got up, stretched, and turned to Josh, who was sipping coffee in the kitchen. I held up my phone. Looks like Jane made the decision for me. He smirked. Good. And just like that, I knew it was over. I sat at Josh and Lisa's kitchen table, staring at my phone. Jane's last text still lingered on the screen. If you don't come home today, don't bother coming home at all. I expected to feel fear, regret, some sense of panic. But all I felt was relief. Josh poured me a cup of coffee and sat across from me. So, what's the move? I exhaled, rubbing my hands over my face. I guess I don't go home. Lisa scoffed from the sink, shaking her head. She's bluffing. She wants you to come running back so she can play the victim. Josh nodded. Yeah, man. She thinks you'll crawl back and apologize for making her feel bad about her own screw-up. I let out a dry chuckle. Well, she's in for a surprise. I picked up my phone and typed out a response. Simple. Direct. Me, okay. I won't. Then I hit send and blocked her number. Lisa nearly choked on her tea. Oh, damn. You actually did it. Josh grinned. Hell yeah. That's what I'm talking about. I felt a weight lift off my chest. For the first time in years, I had made a decision for myself. Not to keep the peace, not to avoid an argument, but because I was done. By mid-morning, my phone started buzzing again. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then another. And another. Jane was trying to reach me from different numbers. Lisa peeked at my phone. That her? I nodded. Probably. Josh leaned back in his chair. Man, you know what's next, right? She's gonna go nuclear. He wasn't wrong. 10 minutes later, I got an email. Are you serious right now? You're actually ignoring me? You humiliated me in front of our neighbors, then ran off like a coward? We need to talk. Come home. I ignored it. 15 minutes later, another one. This is your fault, you know. If you weren't so boring, if you actually made me feel special, maybe I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. That one actually made me laugh. The audacity of this woman. Lisa read it over my shoulder. Oh, she's desperate now. Trying to make you the bad guy. Then came the final email. Fine. You don't want to talk? Then you better come get your stuff. I'm changing the locks. Lisa's eyes widened. Whoa. Josh raised an eyebrow. Is that even legal? I don't know, I muttered, but I don't care. Because at that moment, it wasn't just about getting my stuff. It was about walking into that house one last time and making sure Jane understood that she had lost me for good. I drove back to the house that afternoon. Not because Jane told me to, but because I was ready. Josh offered to come with me, but I told him no. I need to do this alone. When I pulled up in the driveway, Jane was already outside, arms crossed, waiting. She looked furious. Wow, she said as I got out of the car. You actually showed up. I didn't respond. Just walked right past her and into the house. Everything looked exactly the same, but it felt different. Like the home I had built with her wasn't mine anymore. Jane followed me inside. So that's it? You're just gonna grab your stuff and leave. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Yep. She let out a humorless laugh. You're so dramatic. I paused, turning to her. Dramatic. She rolled her eyes. It was just a date. I clenched my jaw. No, Jane. It was a lie. You told another man you were single. You told him we were divorced. And you asked him out. You didn't just dip your toe into cheating. You jumped in head first. She crossed her arms. I didn't sleep with him. I scoffed. Oh, so now that's the line? Not the emotional affair? Not the flirting? Not the sneaking around? Her lips pressed into a thin line. I just wanted excitement. I shook my head, shoving more clothes into my bag. You wanted an exit. Silence. For the first time since this started, Jane actually looked a little shaken. I didn't. Yes, you did, I cut her off. You were looking for a way out of this marriage. Well, congrats. You got it. Her face hardened. Fine. You wanna leave? Then leave. I zipped up my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked to the door. Right as I reached for the handle, she said, "You'll regret this." I turned back, meeting her gaze. And then I said the last thing I would ever say to Jane. No. You will. Then I walked out the door and never looked back. I walked out of that house with my bag slung over my shoulder, my heart pounding, but my mind clear. It was over. Jane had expected me to cave, to argue, to beg, maybe even to yell. She wanted a reaction, something to make her feel like she still had control. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I left. I got in my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. Jane didn't run after me. She didn't try to stop me. Good. But as I turned the corner away from the house that had been my home for years, the weight of everything hit me. I just left my marriage. My life as I knew it, gone in an instant. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. This was the right decision. I had to keep telling myself that. Because the truth was, I didn't feel relieved. I felt empty. I didn't head back to Josh and Lisa's place right away. I just drove. I didn't have a destination. I just kept moving, letting the road stretch out ahead of me, trying to process the mess my life had become. Then, without thinking, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a bar. Not the one I had gone to the night before, but another spot, one I used to go to with Jane back when things were good. Back when we were happy. That thought made my stomach turn. How long had I been living in a lie? I stepped inside, the dim lighting casting everything in a dull glow. A few people sat at the bar, lost in their own problems. The bartender, a guy in his 50s with tired eyes, gave me a nod as I took a seat. "What'll it be?" he asked. I almost ordered whiskey again. But then I stopped myself. Drinking wasn't going to fix this. "Just a soda," I muttered. He raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. A minute later, a glass slid in front of me. I sat there, staring at the bubbles rising in my drink, lost in thought. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Rough night." I turned and saw her. She was sitting 2 stools away, sipping a cocktail, her eyes sharp but kind. Dark hair, light brown skin, a face that looked familiar but took me a second to place. Then it clicked. Emily. An old friend. Someone I hadn't seen in years. "Emily," I said, surprised. She blinked, then her face lit up. "No way. Michael." I let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah. Been a while." Emily and I had known each other back in college. We had a thing once, brief but real. Timing never worked out for us, and eventually we drifted apart. Then I met Jane, and Emily faded into the past. And now, here she was, sitting at the same bar as me, looking like she'd barely aged a day. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She smirked, swirling her drink. "Just in town for work. Thought I'd grab a drink before heading back to my hotel. But I should be asking you that. Last I heard, you were married." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah. Not anymore." Her eyes flickered with understanding. "Divorce." "Something like that." I took a sip of my soda, debating how much to tell her. She studied me for a second, then tilted her head. "Lemme guess. She cheated." I exhaled sharply. "Worse." She tried to convince me it wasn't cheating. Emily's eyebrows shot up. "What?" I gave her the short version. The date, the lies, Robert Cohen, Jane's gaslighting. By the time I finished, Emily shook her head in disbelief. "Jesus. That's some next-level manipulation. Tell me about it." She took another sip of her drink, then leaned forward slightly. "So, what now?" I shrugged. "No clue. Just trying to figure out where I go from here." Emily studied me for a moment. "You know, you always had this way of putting everyone else first." even in college. You'd bend over backward for people who didn't deserve it. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? She smiled, but there was a sharpness to it. It means maybe this is a good thing. Maybe now, you get to finally do things for you. I didn't have a response to that. Because maybe she was right. Emily checked her watch. Look, I gotta head out early tomorrow, but if you're up for it, let's grab breakfast. My treat. I hesitated. I don't know. She smirked. What? You got a wife waiting for you? I chuckled despite myself. Guess not. Then it's a date. I raised an eyebrow. A date. She shrugged. A friendly one. Then she stood, tossing some cash on the bar. See you at the Sunrise Cafe. 9 a.m. Don't be late. And just like that, she was gone. I sat there, staring at my soda, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I barely slept that night. Not because I was sad or angry, but because my mind wouldn't shut off. Jane was out of my life. I had finally walked away. No more games. No more pretending. And now, here I was, sitting in my car outside the Sunrise Cafe, 15 minutes early for breakfast with Emily. I checked my phone out of habit. Nothing from Jane, probably because I had her blocked. But there was a message from Josh. Josh, you good? Me, yeah. At a diner. Meeting an old friend for breakfast. Josh, old friend? I smirked. Me, not like that. Josh just replied with a thumbs up. I put my phone away and exhaled. Why was I nervous? This wasn't a date. Emily was just a friend. But if that was true, why did I care so much about making a good impression? At exactly 9 a.m., Emily walked in. She spotted me right away and smiled. Wow, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. You actually showed up. I smirked. I like breakfast. She laughed. Good to know some things never change. A waitress came over, pouring us coffee. I glanced at Emily's menu. Still get the blueberry pancakes? Her eyes twinkled. You remember? I shrugged. Hard to forget when someone orders the same thing for 4 years straight. She grinned. Well, some traditions are worth keeping. We ordered, and for the first few minutes, we just caught up. She told me about her job, some high-up marketing position that had her traveling all over the country. I told her about my work, my hobbies, how I had been doing before my marriage fell apart. It felt easy, natural, like no time had passed between us. But eventually, the conversation drifted back to the obvious. So, Emily said, stirring her coffee. What's next for you? I sighed. No clue. I mean, I have a job. I have friends. But it feels like I need a fresh start. She nodded thoughtfully. Ever think about leaving town? I frowned. Leaving? She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Yeah. I mean, what's keeping you here? Your house. Jane's probably already filling it with her lies, making herself the victim to everyone you both know. Why stick around for that? I hadn't thought about it like that. So you think I should just pick up and leave? Emily shrugged. I'm just saying, you're at a crossroads. You can either stay here, keep running into the ghosts of your past, or you can start fresh somewhere new. I mulled that over. It was insane. Irrational. Terrifying. But was it? I had no family here. My only real friend in town was Josh. The rest? People Jane and I had built friendships with together. If I stayed, I'd always be Michael, Jane's ex-husband. The guy she betrayed. But if I left, I could be someone new. Emily must have seen the wheels turning in my head because she smiled. Just think about it. The waitress arrived with our food, and for the first time in days, I actually felt hungry. By noon, I was back at Josh and Lisa's, sitting on their couch, replaying everything Emily had said. Could I really leave? Start over? Was that even possible? Before I could dwell on it too much, Lisa walked in, phone in hand, face livid. "Oh, you're gonna want to see this," she said, handing it to me. I frowned and took it. It was a Facebook post. From Jane. "Jane, it's been a rough few days, but I just want to say I never meant to hurt anyone. Sometimes people grow apart, and instead of working on things, they run away. I just wish communication had been better before decisions were made that couldn't be taken back. Love isn't about possession, it's about freedom. I just hope one day he understands that." Broken heart. My blood boiled. Lisa scoffed. "Unbelievable, right?" Josh leaned over, reading the post. "Wow. She lied. She went on a date. And now she's playing the sad victim. She's setting the narrative," I muttered. Lisa nodded. "And people are eating it up. Look at the comments." I scrolled down. Her coworker, "You're so strong, Jane. Some men just can't handle a confident woman." Her cousin, "You deserve happiness, babe. Don't let anyone hold you back." Some random friend, "If he really loved you, he would have understood. Real love isn't about control." I clenched my jaw. She was turning this whole thing around. Josh must have seen my expression because he clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Dude, don't let it get to you." Lisa nodded. "Yeah. Let her play her little games. You know the truth. We know the truth." I sighed, tossing the phone on the table. It's not even about me. It's the fact that she gets to walk away clean, while I'm the bad guy. Lisa crossed her arms. "So, let her have her fake sympathy." Josh grinned. "She's about to be real surprised when she finds out you're not sticking around to play this game." I glanced at him. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward. "I mean, what Emily said. Leave. Move somewhere new. Let her win the small-town gossip war, while you go live your damn life." I exhaled slowly. Maybe Josh was right. Maybe Emily was right. Maybe it was time to walk away for good. That evening, I did something I never thought I'd do. I got on my laptop and started looking at apartments in another city. Just out of curiosity. No commitment. But the more I scrolled, the more real it felt. A new place. A fresh start. A life where I wasn't just Jane's ex. I shut my laptop and exhaled. One more thing to do first. I unblocked Jane's number and sent her one final message. "Me, saw your post. Don't worry, I won't be in your way much longer." I waited a few seconds. "Read." She started typing. Then stopped. Then started again. "Jane, what does that mean?" I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked her again, turned off my phone, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning.